First, we're going to try the centered zipper. So the zipper is going to be centered over your seam allowance. First thing you got to do is see how long your zipper is. So you lay your zipper out and you're going to mark at the bottom of your zipper, pretty much where this zipper stop is. That's where you're going to put your mark. I should use chalk actually. Here we go. So I am going to sew with a long stitch, basting stitch, at 5/8 inch away from the edge. That's going to be my seam allowance, to the mark. And then at that point I'm going to change to my regular stitch at the 2.5 length and then finish all the way down. Starting out, there's no need to backstitch at the top because this is temporary stitching that we're going to take out later. Let's get it going. The mark, I'm going to backstitch a little. I'm going to change my stitch to the 2.5. Change my stitch length. I'm going to keep my same seam allowance, 5/8 inches. And then backstitch at the bottom. Now we'll go to the iron and press that seam allowance open. Alright, so I sewed this part and I pressed it open. Now remember how I said we did this with a long stitch and it's temporary, right? So you don't have to do this, but to make your life easier later on, if you just undo a stitch about every inch or so, that's going to make it a little bit easier for you to undo these stitches later on when the time comes. Alright, so now what I'm going to do, I want the front of the zipper to face this way. And I want the teeth to line up directly with this seam here. So I'm going to lay that down, all the way down. If you happen to have a longer zipper than is needed, you can move this up and then it's easy to sew around without worrying about this zipper stop. This zipper stop can be pretty bulky and difficult to sew around. So if you can get a longer zipper than what you need, you can move it up for the sewing part and then just move this down once it's done and trim that part off. That would make it a little easy, make your life a little easier for you, but I'm just going to do it the hard way to show you. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold these two here. So, and I'm going to sew through the zipper tape and my seam allowance. I'm going to put some pins in to hold it in place first, and then I'll sew with my long stitch, basting stitch, my longest stitch, to hold the zipper in place. Great. So we basted this side together. Now we're going to baste this side together. Alright, so here we are. Zipper is basted, long stitch, to both seam allowances. When you lie it flat, it lies flat, no bumps or anything in there. I got the zipper pull up here and then the zipper stop down here. Now what we have to do is secure the whole thing together by using top stitching. We're going to top stitch on the outside the zipper in place. So you have a couple choices, a couple decisions to make. How are you going to mark where to sew? find your marking tool and mark. I'm just kind of eyeballing it, so I might not really be doing a great job. You can always use your sewing gauge to make sure you have a straight line. I can see that this side is going a little haywire, so I'm going to pull it in a little bit. That looks better. So you can just mark it with your marking utensil and then go back and sew, starting at the bottom. Sew straight up, and then come back, sew across, and then straight up. Another thing you can do, instead of using your chalk, is to find needle and thread and thread baste it. You can put your, just make large stitches with your thread to show where to stitch. The thing that this does that the other things don't do is, in addition to showing you where to actually sew your lines, it also holds all the layers together for you. So you know when you go back and to sew, nothing's going to shift around or move or get turned under or anything annoying like that. So this is the way I'm going to show you to do it today. You can come back and use a different thread, or I left a long tail, so I'm gonna try to just use the same thread actually. But I didn't quite leave long enough, so I'm having to pull it out a little bit. That's what I'm doing. All right, that should be long enough. Another thing that this thread basting does for you is, especially this top zipper part, it wants to like open up and like be like that, and if you sew it like that, it's not going to look very good. So the thread basting ensures that these are towards the center instead of opened up like that. Another thing that I happen to have done is I have the zipper pull up, and that does make your life a little easier, because when I go back to sew, I might need to move the zipper pull around a little bit to get out of the way so I can sew in that area. So having the zipper pull up helps you to be able to adjust where it is during the sewing process. My chalk erases with heat, so I'm going to go ahead and erase those white marks, and then I'm going to sew with my machine, starting down here across, following my thread-based lines. All right, a couple other things I wanted to mention about the zipper is, this is just an example for the video, so this isn't an actual garment, but if this was an actual garment, this is probably a neckline, or it could be the top of a skirt where you're going to attach a waistband. If this is a neckline, you're going to attach either a bias tape to finish off the neckline or a facing. So you are going to want your zipper to really start about the seam allowance amount down from the top raw edge. So you really want it to start about 5/8 inch or 1/2 inch, whatever the seam allowance is, down from the top, okay? Most zippers have a space at the top that don't have the teeth, and so you would want to pretty much line up the top of the zipper with the top of the raw fabric, and that will be enough for your seam allowance right there to make use the seam allowance to make the facing or the bias finish at the top of your garment. The other thing is that this little thing down here is the zipper stop. It holds the teeth together at the bottom so that your zipper stays together. In my situation, I am going to sew below the zipper stop along the fabric part of the zipper tape. And when I open the zipper, you are going to see this stop at the bottom. I'm okay with that. Some people don't like to see the zipper stop at the bottom. They like to end their zippers above the zipper stop because they think it looks better. And they might be right. It's a design choice. You can pick which way you like it. But if you don't want the zipper stop to show, then you will just have the bottom of your zipper above the zipper stop, okay? A lot of zippers are plastic, and it's totally fine to sew over the plastic teeth on zippers. This one and this one that I'm using are both metal, and you can sew across there, but you might break your needle. So if you did want to sew across there, you would just need to go slow, maneuver with the hand wheel instead of using the presser foot. So just go slow, and you probably will make it through without breaking your needle, but you might break your needle, who knows. But those are a couple other zipper things to think about when you're putting in a zipper. I did not backstitch at the beginning. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pull that thread through to the back and tie it off in the back. Change which side my zipper foot is on. Alright, I pretty much know that this zipper stop here is going to get in my way, so I'm going to try to move it. And I'm going to try to push it down past my zipper foot, if it'll go. Yeah, there we go. I got it past. Alright, looking pretty good. Let me pull that string to the back. All So now we can open up this center seam that we basted, and we can take out our threads. Alright, so here's our centered zipper placement. The zipper is centered under our seam allowance, more or less. Looks a little crooked, but it's okay. And there we are. Alright, so here we have our centered zipper. It's machine sewn in. I'm going to show you a way to hand sew in a centered zipper also. So this piece I've already basted along and then backstitched, then did my regular stitch all the way down, backstitch, and I planned ahead and clipped every sew bit to make it easier to pull that out later, and I pressed that flat. So now we are going to lay this down. We're going to do the same thing. The teeth are going to be centered over that seam all the way down, and I'm going to pin it in, and we're going to hand baste with needle and thread, hand baste in the zipper tape to the seam allowance on both sides. That's our first step, okay? Alright, so the zipper is basted in. I basted it by hand. There's actually no reason why you have to do it by hand. You can do it by machine as well. Either or, totally fine. But it's all lying flat. And this is the front side. I just want to show you how to do this by hand, because you just never know. Maybe one day your machine's not working. Maybe one day your zipper skills just aren't working for you. So here's my prepared zipper, centered zipper. Another reason why you might want to do this is if your thread doesn't quite match your material, and if you top stitch, it won't look that good. So that would be another reason to do it. But we're going to use a prick stitch. It's another form of a back stitch. I'm going to start down here. You come up and then you just take like one or two threads of the fabric, not much at all. And you go back and then you go forward a bit. And when you pull the stitch up, it pretty much becomes invisible. Even with this totally different color of thread, it shows up, it hardly shows at all, which is nice. And when you're going along, you do want to try to make your stitches to be at regular intervals. You don't want one to be a 1/4 inch and then the other one 1/2 inch and the other one 1 inch. You want them to be pretty even, because even though the thread color doesn't show with this prick stitch, there's going to be a little indentation every time you take a stitch, and those indentions are going to show up. So you want them to be at regular intervals. Another reason why you might want to use this method is if your fabric is very thick. If you're like trying to do a sweater or a fleece or like something that's pretty thick, your machine might not like putting the zipper in by top stitching. So if you can do this Prickstitch method, it will look a lot better. Some people just feel where the zipper stop is, put a little pin in the bottom to mark the location, like that. And then they just go ahead and take it over to the machine, starting at the top. Keep a regular distance away from the seam, and just sew down, sew across where you have the pin, and then sew back up. That's probably the fastest way to do it, but probably not the most accurate, because you're sewing down and then up. Your fabric can kind of shift and pull so that your zipper ends up twisting a little bit. The better way to do it is starting at the bottom, come out a little bit and then sew up, and then come back, do the same thing on the other side, so that you're sewing in the same direction all the way up. So if the fabric does get pulled or anything, it'll pull the same direction and will be straight. Another thing that you can do is, if you have some tape handy, you can get a length of tape and set it down centered, and then just use your tape as a guide, sewing around your tape.